Here it is, December the 7th, in our 50th year, and we are already in the midst of those days in the Advent calendar, which are sacred to Christians, and which also, I think, have symbolic meaning, if only in the way in which fiction and poetry have meaning, to those who are not themselves Christians. In the spirit of the humanity which we all share, I would like to begin my own reflections on Christmas with a Jewish story I first read in a book by Elie Wiesel. Once upon a time, it seems, when a great rabbi saw misfortune coming, he would go into a certain part of the forest to meditate. And there he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and a miracle would take place, and the feared danger would not come. Years later, when a successor to that great rabbi had a similar need to speak to heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest, and he would say to God, "I do not know how to light the fire, but I am still able to say the prayer." And again, a miracle would occur. Still later, another rabbi, faced with the threat of another misfortune to his people, went into the same forest and said, "I do not know how to light the fire. I do not know the prayer, but I know the place, and that must be sufficient." It was sufficient, and once more, a miracle was accomplished. Finally, it fell to a still later rabbi to try to overcome misfortune to his people. He sat in his armchair at home, put his hands to his head, and prayed, "I am unable to light the fire, and I do not know the prayer. I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is to tell the story." And he told the story. And that alone was enough. And the miracle again took place. This story visits my imagination during the Christmas season. And I thought of it when I was invited to speak here tonight for our 50th Lovefeast. I knew what our setting would be tonight. Borrowing from the old tradition of our Moravian founders, those who prepared the feast would have purchased buns, brewed coffee, arranged lights, decorated the church, and shaped a program of words and music appropriate to the familiar hope of Christmas. And people would come, I knew that. And others like you will continue coming all through the remaining days before the 25th to almost every church across the city. But why, I have asked myself, do we, old and young, rich and poor, believers and non-believers, I assume, why do we come to this love feast? What are we expecting to see and to hear? Some of you, of course, come because you always come when church bells ring. For you, Christmas is just another feast day in a crowded religious calendar. Others of you come because your families have gathered. And going as a family to a love feast is a Christmas custom, like trimming the tree or giving presents. Others of you perhaps watch the love feast as you watch the Nutcracker or Dickens' Christmas Carol or It's a Wonderful Life or some favorite Christmas movie. All of you know the way to the place that is Christmas. But others of you, I'm convinced, may have come uncertainly and hesitantly. You may not feel either faithful or joyful or tonight triumphant. You may no longer know how to light the fire. You may no longer be able to say the prayers. You could not have found the right place in this forest sanctuary, except that others pointed out the path you should take. But you do know the story, as that fourth rabbi did. And for reasons that you yourselves perhaps do not understand, you want to hear the story again. The British writer Rebecca West says that we in the modern world are engaged in what she called a desperate search for a pattern. We see nations in dissolution, tribes in conflict, cities in collapse, families in turmoil, change and decay all around us. But for one serene and magical hour in a beautiful sanctuary during the Christmas weeks, we hear a story. And there comes to us an awareness of community, of our accepting others, and of being accepted ourselves, which brings to our mind the possibility that there might, after all, be a pattern in life. Look again at the Christmas story. At a time when every morning's newspaper may tell of a child abused or abandoned, and when every evening's television screen reminds us of children starving and dying in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Ukraine, in Nigeria, even in our own blessed land, we tonight pay homage to one particular child. And in so doing, we show reverence for childhood itself. The stars in the sky, which looked down where he lay, look down still on children everywhere. And we know, if we are wise, that children are ours, like the child in the manger, to love and protect. At a time when sometimes women are not safe from assault, even where they live, we behold again the Madonna, the mother in whose lap the child is laid to rest. Her to whom the angel said, "Hail thou that art highly favored, blessed art thou among women." At a time when many men across the globe, driven by waywardness and lust and a desire for power, forsake cradle and home and become wanderers over the earth, we are reassured to see Joseph standing patient and firm and watching over his family with benevolence and virtue. And what are we to make of the shepherds and the wise men from the east? The shepherds who are like our neighbors, with faces like those of everyday friends, and the wise men from a distance, not yet rested from the hard and bitter agony of their journey. The shepherds we know, for we have seen them across the street and in our stores. The wise men, however, are strange and different. They come from foreign lands, and they speak with alien accents. Their very names identify them as being in so many ways not like us. And yet, like the shepherds, like the oxen too, if we are to believe the ancient legend of the friendly beasts, they kneel before the child and present him with their gifts. At a time of hatred among religions, when the ancestry or the color or the creed of someone else is sufficient to invite anger and bloodshed, we see in the faces of strangers clustered around the child in a stable the possibility for a union of men and women in acceptance and love. And at this particular Christmas season, in spite of all the doubts we have and all the risks that we take, how encouraging it is that in our nation and from this very city, there are generous men and women who go to people and to countries they hardly know, bringing not gold and frankincense and myrrh, but bread and milk and medicine. And how comforting it is to imagine that some of these gifts will come to a mother with a child in her lap and a father standing patiently nearby. This is the story which never grows old. And maybe we can do no more than tell the story. And perhaps what happens to many of us in this serene and magical hour of a love feast is nothing more than a reminder that the story has lasted through many centuries and that it suggests a pattern, a meaning that can still bring new life. For some of us, however, the story simply as a story may not be enough. And we would like to go back to a distant moment, most likely in a long ago childhood Christmas, in the warmth and holiness of our own families, where we did know and did understand our place, and where we lighted fires, and where we said prayers, and where miracles took place. We do yearn for transcendence. And even the most worldly among us like to imagine, I think, that beyond the child and the mother and Joseph and the shepherds and the wise men, There are also the angels coming not from Nazareth or the nearby country fields or the faraway east, but from heaven itself. The still young, forever young Anne Frank, hiding in an Amsterdam attic from the unimaginable evil that would eventually claim her life. Anne wrote in her journal, "Give of yourself. Give as much as you can. There is plenty of room for everyone in the world. Enough money, riches, and beauty for all to share. God has made enough for everyone." And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, writing about a Soviet labor camp in which for 8 years he was brutally imprisoned, says, "Your soul is begging to pray. Why don't you give it its freedom? We must pray about things of the Spirit so that we can remove the scum of anger from our hearts." And from our own Southland of slavery comes this heart-rending spiritual of pain and promise. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. One day when I was walking along, oh, yes, Lord, the element opened and love came down. Oh, yes, Lord. On that first Christmas night that we remember tonight, if we continue the story to its climax, the element did open and the love came down, and a voice was heard saying, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people." What if, after all, the song the angels sang is the same song that others, before and after that night in Bethlehem, have also heard? What if, after all, the story we tell every year here in this place is in truth the pattern that we in our times so desperately search for? God, Anne Frank said, has made enough for everyone. No more let sin and sorrow grow, nor thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow, far as the curse is found. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love.